Hi everybody, Rob here, and welcome to this second part of my weathering videos. So this one, I said I was going to talk about how I paint rust. Rather than doing any kind of fancy effects, this is just about painting rust. Although I have to say, I don't just use straight paints from the pot, although I'm using chocolate, so 872, 983 flat earth and a yellow ochre from Vallejo. They're model colour paints. I'm using a MIG rusty pigment. It's kind of a browny rust. It's got a hint of red to it, but that's old rust P230. I'm also using just a little bit of plaster. This is AK Interactive plaster. You can use whichever ones you've got to hand. Whatever's from your local model shop is absolutely fine. And then a Citadel Troll Slayer orange, just for the kind of vibrancy. Now, there won't be that much of that in the finished effect, but it does help. Now, other tools I use are just bits of packing foam. So you can use stippling brushes, so this kind of thing with a kind of a flat end for stippling can be quite useful, especially when you get to doing the plaster side of things. Although the plaster is a subtle effect, it's really there just for picking up some of the surface detail, because afterwards I tend to go back with either a bolt gunmetal type colour, gunmetal grey, and sometimes an oily steel, just to kind of pick up some of the surface detail, as though the surface which is rusted has just been rubbed against, something's kind of rubbed against it and just taken off the surface corrosion to leave some of the shiny new metal underneath. Anyway, let's get to it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just using this old bit of plastic card here, just as a palette. So I'm going to just add a little bit of my chocolate brown. Now, my base coat here is that same chocolate brown. I'm going to dump on just a little bit of flat earth, which is one of my favourite Vallejo colours. Really good, really versatile colour. It's good for all sorts of things, from rust to leather, flesh, all sorts. And I'm just going to dump on a little bit of my yellow ochre. Now, I'm doing this kind of all in one go. You can do it just stage by stage. In fact, if I was probably sitting here thinking about it as a painting project rather than as a video, I would probably be doing it like that. I would probably do it stage by stage. So I'd mix two of these colours and then I'd move forward. Okay, so excuse me. So when it comes to the sponge, this is just old blister sponge. You can just use your fingers if you prefer, or you can take a pair of tweezers. I tend to use these kind of very fine tweezers, use the backhand side of them, and just get in there, mix it all about a little bit, and then I go straight in and I start dabbing it on, and I'm constantly moving the actual part of the piece of sponge itself, and I'm forever going back, just mixing in variations in this colour, and you'll see this is looking particularly disgusting at the moment. It doesn't look good, but it will start to come together as you turn this around, keep it moving. You don't want to keep the problem you can get with using bits of sponge that you've torn up like this is that you can get repetition in the texture, which you don't really want. I want a little bit more of that brighter orange in there now, so I'm going to dump some of this down the top of the bottom. Now, the real key to this, of course, is to use references. References are king for everything, and I talk about this a lot in my actual kind of day-to-day 3D work that I do. Having real-world references will get you far, far further than anything else in the road to realism. Okay, so I'm reasonably happy with this. There are a few little bits of repetition in there, so I'm just going to go and cover all of those up. And that's looking actually not too bad. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add two things. I'm going to add to my paint just a little bit of this pigment and also a little bit of plaster, and I'll go for the plaster first. Just going to dump that on here. Really don't need much. That's probably twice as much as I actually need. And just pick out a little bit of the different pigment. Dump that on there. And when it comes to thinning and keeping this fixed in place, there are a few different things you can use. I actually use thinner medium quite a lot, and just going to dump a little bit of that on there, and I'm going to go for my flat earth. Just a dollop on there. I'm just going to mix this all up. You can see I'm lacking the right amount of paint. Okay, so let's keep mixing. Right, this is looking a bit better. A little bit more thinner medium, like so. Get this in there, and thinner medium just helps this stay kind of usable for a little bit longer. Okay, right, so I'm just going to rinse that old brush, dump that there, and then I'm going to go back to my foam. I'm just going to kind of move this around so I get to a different portion of the foam, and then we can start applying it. Now you can see this is slightly redder than the previous stage, which we will go back over with. So I'm just going to scrape up some of this texture. And really the key to this is literally just keep your foam moving. Now I'm just doing a patch in the middle of this sheet of plastic card. I probably should go right up to the edges. Let's do that. I'm going to go right up to 3 edges, just so you can see the effect, rather than trying to work out which bits I'm meant to do or not. Okay, so hopefully you can see already here. I'm just going to scrape some of this across. Hopefully you can see that there's some decent surface texture, and this is looking, it's probably a bit too wet to really see. This is starting to look a bit more like real rust. And I'm just going to add a little bit more ochre to this mix. Just mix that in very, very gently, and I'm just going to dab that in places. Like so. Scrape off some of that texture. Okay. Right, so that is pretty much it. That's the way I paint in my rust. So there are kind of large areas of variation in there and small areas of variation, and that's exactly how I did this guy. Exactly the same process. All these big rusty patches are painted exactly like that. Some of the colours are very slightly different, so there's a bit more ochre in this, and in places there's a bit more orange, and there's also a slight filter over the top. Excuse me, I've had a bit of a bug over the holidays, so okay, so all that's left now is just to shake up a metal colour, and you can either paint in, you could paint in patches of whatever the kind of the top coat might have been, whatever that paint might have been, but I'm going to take this isn't the best way of doing this, but just for speed, I'm just going to take a little bit of that gunmetal from the top of there, and I'm just going to wipe off the excess. Okay, and then if I just dry brush really, really gently, should go across this side of the. Hopefully you can see what that's doing, and that's picking up the surface detail of the plaster that's been mixed into the upper levels of that paint. And this is what really makes it all pop. So I'm hoping it shows on the video okay. Let's have a look. Just get a little bit more of that on there. Okay, so this is all perfectly dry now, and let me make sure that this is focused so you can see it all properly. So hopefully you can just pick up some of that metal texture which is just showing through, and that's it. That really is all I do when I'm weathering my models, if I'm painting in my rust textures. So that's how I do it. I use another method sometimes as well, which is using the airbrush, and I'll show that in a follow-up video later on. Slightly more involved, but I wouldn't say it's any better or worse, it's just a different look. So that's how I do my rust painting. Thanks very much. I'll see you all again in another video very soon.